Hi everyone, happy today and welcome to the Space of the Butterflies podcast. If you're new here, my name is Carrie. I'm on Ravelry and on Instagram as Carrie May, so come say hi and find me there. And this is a knitting and crafty and other sort of creative things that I can shoehorn within the title type of podcast. Nice short title there. Well done, Carrie. If you are returning, welcome back. Thank you very much for coming to join me again. It's always lovely to have company in this little corner of the internet. So, let's get on with today. As you can see, I am not wearing knitwear today. This is because it is still hotter than the face of the sun. It is less hot than the very, very hot space of the sun we were in last week. But it is still, I think it's still predicted to be about 28 degrees today. I am recording this on a Saturday, in between some tennis matches and England losing another World Cup game. At least that'll tell you, if they go on to win, that'll tell you exactly what time I recorded this. But for the moment, they are losing. Tennis is much better. I've been watching tennis this morning. But yeah, it forecast to be about 28 degrees here today. And even though I've got the windows open, the idea of putting out on anything, even a tiny little shawl, is just too much. Maybe I should crochet a flower to wear in my hair when it's really hot, just so I can prove I really am a knitter, crafty type person. Let me know what you think on that one. Maybe not. I think if I crocheted a flower, the kids would have it, or the girls would have it out of my hands before it was barely cast off. So that might have to do for now. So let us crack on into what I have been making, and more importantly, what I have finished this week. Because I've actually done quite a lot of crafting. Last weekend, we had just the pure bliss of really not doing very much on Sunday, having had loads and loads of weekends back to back where it was all manically busy the whole time. Last weekend we had Sunday and we just sat. I mean, I may have sat with my feet in a bucket of water because it was still very, very hot, but I didn't have to do anything, and we kind of ignored the fact that we needed to do some housework and just, worked around it. And yeah, I just got to sit and be creative in the sunshine, and it was really lovely. So last week I picked up my Craftpod. Now, this was not the Craftpod that arrived through the post this week. This was the one, she's down there, I'll tell you about that in a minute. This was the Craftpod that arrived in March. It's the spring Craftpod, and I don't know why I never really picked it up. I know I only just finished the winter one. I finished the winter one the week the spring one arrived because I was really saving it for a special occasion. And maybe I was doing that without really thinking about it. But yes, I have no idea. I remember opening it, I loved everything that's in it, and then it just got put in a pile somewhere, and I didn't pick it up again until we got to last weekend. And I thought, I don't want to knit, it's too hot. Let's find something else to do. So I opened it up, and the first thing I made is a project bag. Ta-da! Oh, it's a project bag that's covered in fluff because I've been spinning. So it's got, oh, this is going to blow out beautifully, isn't it? My arm now looks like it's, been dead for a week. And this is a very strange colour. This is mustard. If I hold it back here, that's a much better colour, and my arm has returned to life. But just showing you the close-up on the embroidery. I'm not quite sure what plant that one's supposed to be, but it's very pretty. So the pattern in the leaflet that came with it suggested that embroidery, but in the middle. But once an overachiever, always an overachiever. I'm never going to grow out of that one. I just like the idea of putting a few more flowers on there, and the embroidery was so much fun. I was really glad I did it. So the daisies that went next to it, so those are stem stitch, split stitch. So split stitch stems, and then lots and lots of little lazy daisies to make the petals, and then I'm going to let us see it. Who knows? If it goes blurry and I can't get it to focus, it's French knots. I don't like that, maybe it'll focus. Yeah, so French knots in the middle. Sideways French knots, but that's how it goes. And then on the back, I put another one. Because I was just having too much fun embroidering on mustard linen. It's so nice to work with. The needle just sort of glided through it because it's a much looser weave than calico or anything else we usually work with. It was just so lovely to embroider on it. And so that's what I did Sunday, and then I think think it was Sunday, unless it was Saturday. It might have been Saturday. Yes, so I started this Saturday, Started it Saturday, had lots of time to stitch on Sunday, which I'm getting confused. So by Saturday evening, I'd done those 2 embroideries and then this one on the back. And this was one great big giant piece. You can see there's no seam down the end there. So it was just a case of stitching, marking it out onto the fabric and then stitching it. And then I followed the instructions to turn it into a bag. But at the same time, I also wanted to make it a lined bag, just to make it a bit more robust so it can cope with me, and to protect the back of the embroidery because it's so pretty and I didn't want it to get stretched out of shape or anything like that. So I thought, I know, I will line it. So I went on YouTube and looked up a tutorial for how to make a lined drawstring bag. And basically I used the first tutorial I found, which I will link to in the show notes. I think it is just called drawstring bag, lined drawstring bag tutorial. So it's not terribly, it's a practical name rather than a fanciful name. But I will link to the one in the show notes because it was very, very good. And then I went digging in the fabric stash. And you can see some of the fabric is behind me. That one's all fabric. There's at least another one that's got fabric. Quite a lot of that's fabric as well. I do seem to be a bit of a fabric collector, which is not a bad thing. Being a fabric collector is a lovely thing, but occasionally I also need to be a fabric user. I have plans to be a fabric user. I will tell you more about those later on. So I went digging through the stash, and actually digging through the stash has brought up a whole load of other ideas for doing other things. And I tried some cream that had navy blue boats on it because never knowingly turned down a boat, particularly not in boat fabric. It's lovely. I looked at some olives, I looked to see if I've got any yellows, pulled out all sorts of boxes and went digging through, and then I found a 1 fat quarter that jumped out of the box, and I knew it was going to be the very perfect thing. And I'm just turning the bag inside out. I bought it a while ago from Bramble Patch over by Northampton to try and start building up a little bit of a collection of low volume prints, because I love the look of low volume quilts where it's not just plain white or cone of snow for everything, where the background, as it were, has a bit of interest. And I bought this just on a whim. And is that not just the perfect match? That's showing relatively true to life on the colour. It's a lovely mustardy alphabet print on cream fabric, and it was just perfect. And I thought, right, that's it, all sorted. So this, but in a fat quarter there wasn't enough to line this project bag, so I had to cut and do a seam along the bottom here, and that made it, even though the measurements were right, just the presence of the seam in the bottom of the bag made it a bit clunky on the fit. So this was sewn with a 1/4 inch seam, and then I used pinking shears to take it down. It's probably an 1/8 plus the zigzags from the pinking shears, and it just sits a bit better. And actually I found when I was seaming and trying to get everything to fit inside each other nicely, I found I needed to do that to the seams of the lining as well. But it's not going to be taking the bulk of the weight, particularly at the bottom actually, because it's one single piece on the outer layer. So basically, the lining a drawstring bag, you make another bag out of the inner, and then you put the inner inside it, everything sort of right sides facing out as it'll be when it finishes. And then this top bit, to make the casing, it's fold over, sorry, make that focus. It's fold it over and then fold it over again. It makes quite a chunky casing. And then I used a safety pin to thread through this gorgeous ribbon. So it does mean that that is it fully drawstrung. So there's still a little bit of a gap at the top. But actually for me as a knitter, that's exactly what I want. So I can put a ball of sock yarn in there. I'm never going to take this on the train. It's far too beautiful to take on the train. Things get dirty on the train or end up in the bottom of my handbag where a child will have left, half a biscuit and a tractor. It's amazing the things we find in my handbag when I get to work. Sometimes the kids leave me stories. They put picture books into my big work bag next to my laptop. So I'm like pulling out my laptop and all these papers, and the snail and the whale, because what don't I need in the office? What you could do as well, and I'll just show you this. I haven't sewn it up yet, and I probably will at some point. That is the other side, so it could make a 2 drawstrings and whoosh to close. You know what I mean. 2 drawstrings where you pull and it closes from opposite directions. It wouldn't make the closure any tighter. That's just to do with the volume of having lining and linen and folds and all the rest of it. That's a volume issue rather than anything else. But it would make a different way of closing it. I may just slip stitch it together. I might just leave it. It's not actually very noticeable. But yeah, so I think that's beautiful. And I don't know what took me so long, but it's lovely. And then, having finished that, this was what else I did last weekend. I pulled out the other half of the kit. The Craftpod kits tend to come with something embroidery and something else. So all the ones I've had so far, and I started with winter, so winter 2017. So I've had winter 2017, spring 2018, and summer 2018 has just arrived. And they've all had a hoop and a something. In the winter it was a lino block carving kit. So much fun. I should get that out again. We just had a blast doing that. With this, obviously, it was the project bag. The summer one I'll show you in a minute. It's a needle case. But so this was the other, as it were, and then we got on to the hoop. Excuse the rustly noises off. So what I should have been making is this, which is called the Botanical Stitch Practice. And it's a stitch sampler with lots and lots of different lovely little stitches. With the exception of that one, which is needle weaving, I kind of know how to do all these stitches. My grandmother taught me to embroider. In fact, my grandmother taught me to embroider by making, a 7-8-year-old me embroider a set of napkins for my mother's birthday present. There were 6, and I did a lot of lazy daisies, and I remember her trying to coax me into doing just one more. I love crafting, I've always loved crafting, but I must have been really quite tiny because it took a lot of coaxing, and my mother was never allowed to forget that I had put a lot of effort into making them. I think mostly she probably wasn't allowed to forget that my grandmother had put a lot of effort into my making them. But she did treasure them, and we do still have them in the family, so that proves their longevity. Anyway, so I looked at this and thought, it's pretty, but I'm not sure it's what I want to make. So I looked at all the stitches and the colours, and I did a little bit of poodling around on Pinterest, as you do. And goodness me, there are some beautiful hoop patterns on Pinterest. If you ever need a rabbit hole to fall down for a little bit, just start Googling hoop embroidery patterns on Pinteresting. I wonder why Google is a verb and Pinterest isn't yet. It's an evolution of language that hasn't quite happened. Anyway, Pinterest searching for embroidery hoops. Oh, there's so many that are so pretty. I favourited about half a dozen. But then I didn't buy any because I couldn't quite find exactly what I wanted. And I didn't just copy them because that's really rude and breach of copyright, which is bad. But I did sit down with a pen and paper and just keep sketching and sketch out a few different options. And then I came up with this. So the slightly wobbly circle that proves that I really need to find where my compasses are is that one around there. And then we've got lazy daisies, lots of French knots. Oh no, sorry, those aren't lazy daisies. Those are lazy daisies. Lots of French knots in the middle, and then these are just back stitch around the edge. Oh, this is stem stitch around the edge, which actually wasn't in the sampler, but is one of my favourite stitches. It's supposed to make nice curves if I could actually draw a circle in the first place. But I quite like the rusticity, is that a word? I like that it's rustic, I like it's not a perfect circle. This branch up here came from the set of possible patterns for embroidering onto the project bag, so that's pulling that in. These leaves obviously are recognisable from over here, and then you can just about see there are a whole load of little white French knots up there. So it's just very gentle and very simple. And I initially intended those white French knots to sort of be like blossom, and then I remembered this spring and thought, no, there's snow, aren't they? It's still snowing in winter, in spring round here. And then when it's finished, it's obviously mounted in the hoop and then pulled tight and then cut off a bit and glued down with a bit of super glue. So that won't go anywhere. And that has been hanging on my bedroom wall because our bedroom wall's bright yellow. So you always wake up and it's sunny, and it's actually perfect colours for it. So until we get around to hanging the picture that is currently on the floor, propped up against the wall, that has been on the floor, propped up against the wall for quite a while. We will have this, and it's lovely. So that was my spring craft pod. The only thing I have left to do now is to drink the ginger tea, which I will try the ginger tea quite happily, just not right now. The idea of drinking a hot drink. I'm not very big on hot drinks anyway. I only really have hot drinks when it's cold, and really, you know, chilly morning hot drink is good. The idea of a hot drink now. So yes, so that the tea bag is now downstairs rather than sitting in the craft pod on my shelf. But that was the spring craft pod. So, what I might just tell you about the summer craft pod while we're here. It's not something I've done, it's something I'm about to do. But let's show you because it's sat here. I'm doing well putting everything immediately behind the camera. This is not quite everything in the craft pod because one of the things we got was the most gorgeous, cute little rose pin, and I have put it immediately behind where you are sort of sitting because that's where my pin banner is. So there is a new pin on my pin banner, which is very exciting. It was made by Maggie Moo Designs. So if you like pins, oh, won't put my finger over the. Don't put your finger over the actual web address, Gary. Also try to get it in focus would be good. I'm hoping that's in focus. It'll be in the show notes anyway. So what we have this time, we have a dinky little hoop, a teeny tiny one. And that is going to be for, let's go and find the pictures now. Not that one. Preparation for men's sport performance now. That is going to be for a gorgeous little cross stitch that has been designed by the incredibly talented Lucy from Attic 24, who does all the amazing multicoloured blankets. You'd probably, if you were at all into yarn, you'd probably have to have lived under a rock to not have been aware of Lucy and her blankets. I've made the cottage ribble one, I've got 2 underway, so that was a lovely surprise. Someone whose designs I already like, and it's very sweet. So I have a little rose cross stitch to do. I love doing cross stitch, that was one of my gateway crafts. I mean, after the incident with my grandmother and the many blue Lazy Daisy napkins. She did also teach me to knit, I can't complain. But then my mum, the gateway craft she introduced me to was cross stitch, and that's where, see, it's all her fault, that's where everything went from. So there is the cross stitch is the little hoop, and then it's going to be making this beautiful little needle book. And just playing with stitches, so it's sort of colouring in with stitches. The fabric for the front of that is already printed, and so it looks like that. And so we just get to, you know, embroider some of these green lines, add more French knots. I find French knots very satisfying. So something like that. So I've been trying to decide whether to just jump in or whether to do something on some of my other projects, but it's all very addictive, so I think this weekend I might do a bit more of that. So by the next podcast there may be some Craftpod progress. Oh, I'll show you the colours for the embroidery threads. They're perfect for this summer as well. They're quite sort of toasted, you know, like a summer when it's all hot and you haven't mown the lawn for about a month because it's basically just brown and slightly crispy around the edges. It's those colours. They're lovely. Definitely warm and summery. Golden light, you know, beautiful long evenings. It's that kind of summer in a craft pod. So if I can tuck it all, this is the challenge. Oh yes, get it all back in the box. Good job. Right, so that was that craft pod. Now there is one more other thing that I have finished. I have been on a finishing roll. Well, I've been making small things, which probably helps. I'm trying to remember what stage these were in last time you saw them, because I have not 1, but 2 Maharani socks. However you say that. I think it was Maharani. We're going to go with Maharani. So these are just vanilla socks in Wollmeise Twin, which is the one with nylon in. The colourway is called Maharani, hence Maharani socks. 72 stitch socks, 20 rows of rib here, top down socks, 60 rows there, 18 rows there, heel flap, 20 rows of decreases, 54 rows of rounds, probably should be saying rounds, 54 rounds of foot and a toe. They are on sock blockers that are my size, which is why they are too small for John's ginormous hooves. John does not really have ginormous hooves, he has perfectly normal sized feet, it's just my feet are smaller. For a woman, I have ginormous hooves. So yeah, these aren't, it's not really blocking the sock, but it is holding them up in a very nice shape. And this colourway I just think is beautiful. I'm trying to get it to, the camera's struggling to read it a little bit. But the yellow is reading right, but in between the yellow, that looks like it's yellow and black on my screen at the moment. That's yellow and royal blue. And then this is, we've got sort of royal blue, turquoise, and then the purpley reds going with the yellows. It's absolutely lovely. I wonder if you can see it better on the heel flap. Yeah, that's reading a bit better on the heel flap. So yes, lovely, lovely colours. It was one of those, I mean, it's a skein I bought when we were in Pfaffenhofen an der Ilm, which is where the Wollmeise shop is. Oh, that place is just heaven. And it's a colour John chose when we were there, and I just thought it was beautiful, but it's one where it was beautiful in the twizzled up skein, and then when I pulled it apart and put it round on my Swift to start winding out, it was just, oh, it got a wow reaction from me and from the girls who I think were in the room at the time. Like, is that for me, mummy? Is that mine? No, it's for your dad. Are you sure? Like, I'm really sure. It's your dad's socks. So he has another pair of socks for the sock drawer, which is good. I am on mission to replace all the ones that have holes in and stop him wearing odd socks. Another pair succeeded. Had I had more time or the ability to bend time to my will, these might have been finished for his birthday, so he can just have them randomly now. Every now and again I think, I know, I should knit some socks and then I should save them so I'm ready for Christmas or something like that. But I just like giving them to him. I like giving him his socks as soon as they're finished, because I usually get a, ooh, Rob, that's nice reaction. So these are all ready for him. He's taken the girls to Hobbycraft, I think, to buy some paint, which means they will almost certainly come home with a new craft kit, because if anybody can like sell up with their daddy, it's my girls. Good skills, girls. They may not, however, entirely miss out on this, because that's a pair of UK man size 10-11 socks. And out of the skein of Wollmeise, that's what's left. I mean, that's a good chunk of Wollmeise left. I don't think it would entirely make a pair of little boy socks, but it could certainly do some decent stripes. I could stripe that with something else. I shall have to save it. I have a new leftover yarn scheme, or at least I'm going to try a new leftover yarn scheme now. We've got an ice bucket that was a birthday present, not this one just gone, but the one before that when we were living in a tent, and it was very useful for keeping the bottles of wine in. Now we live in a house with a fridge. It's not so essential, so it's ended up becoming a bucket full of yarn. So I'm trying to separate out yarn that I think is special and want to keep versus leftover yarn that I'm quite happy to give to my girls' school when I've got enough of it to make it worth giving. I gave them a massive, like one of those big bag for life shopping bag size bags of leftover yarn earlier in the year, and I think they really liked that. And it's so much better than they have it, and it's just sat in a corner. I mean, I haven't done anything with it. I clearly wasn't going to do anything with it, but I did go through, and anything that was hand spun, or I think some of the socks that rock, if I had any, I barely had any leftovers with that, but there's a little bit of socks that rock that came out, there's a little bit of Wollmeise that came out. Anything that was just a little bit special that I thought one day I might want that for some colour work or stripes or something like that, that all came out. But just the ordinary run-of-the-mill stuff all went in. And it felt good that someone was actually using it and not just taking it up. So this is going in the ice bucket. The previous socks, leftovers, that will go into the can go to school. Mainly it was too long a repeat to actually be worth using. So it's just over there, so I should try and chuck it in the right direction. It's not in the ice bucket, but it is on the top of the bookcase next to it. We'll call it a win. Throwing things is not my natural forte. I'm not particularly sporty talented. My sports teachers used to say I played sport with lots of enthusiasm and very little talent, and it was true. I can sail, I can swim, I don't need to be able to throw things. John always says that he's spent all of our marriage trying to teach me how to catch, and we're just about getting there. I think the children will be better than me before we get anywhere. So that is what I have spent actually quite a lot of this week knitting. I was only on the heel yesterday, and then I came home and started watching the tennis. And I finished the toe this morning. Thank you, Djokovic and Nadal. That got knit a lot faster than I thought it was going to. Also, it's small, so it's not too hot to have sat in my lap. And I don't have to think about socks. So socks is what it was. But the other big knitting project on the go, the sort of latest garment, which is sat in my oh so beautiful yarn bowl, which is, it's Belinda Harris Reed, it's got it on the bottom of it. That's convenient for remembering who made my yarn bowl. But yeah, if you ever come across her yarn bowls that I showed, they're gorgeous. I could pet it as well as knit from it. So this, I promise this has actually grown since you last saw it, but I'm not entirely convinced it'll look like it has a lot. So this is, I think it's Bairbre. Maybe say Bairbre with a French accent. We're going to call it Bairbre. It's an Isabell Kraemer design, and the yarn is Sanguine Gryphon Bugga in Peacock Autumn Tiger Beetle. I think that's right. If it's not right, I'll put it here, but I'm pretty sure that's right. And let's see if we can get the camera to read it. Oh, camera's reading it a bit better today. That's nice. I must have slightly better light. So it is a dark green, but it's lots of different colours of dark green, all melded together. There's sort of tealy greens and olivey greens and all my favourite sort of colour greens. So the position we're in at the moment, that was the needle. It's on Addie's, so they hit the yarn bowl with a clatter. I'm kind of at here right now. So we're just starting to come around. Eventually it's going to be a V-neck. Hopefully not one that looks like that. So yeah, I'm just starting on the shoulder. So it's back and forth while we do the V-neck, and then I think at the point of making the V, which will hopefully be somewhere down here somewhere, then it separates for the sleeves and joins in the round, and then it's basically stockinetting the round for a bit, which I like. I do like stockinetting the round at the moment. I'm very keen on things that only do interesting things in certain parts of jumpers, because it's just good mindless knitting for a bit, which is what we need. So we are starting the top of the set-in sleeve, and it's the first time I've knit a top-down set-in sleeve, and it's very clever. So this up here, that line there is the shoulder. It's almost like an external seam on the shoulder. So that's sort of the break for the shoulder, and then you can start to see that's the top of the sleeve cap going round, so up and down here. So these two markers here are marking either sides of the sleeve stitches. This is the front, which you can see is starting to expand down into a V-neck. And then this back is basically just staying the same. I don't think I'm increasing in the back at the moment. Let's have a quick look at it and check. No, there's no back increases going on at the moment. Nice line of purl stitches. You see that there? There we go, little line of purl stitches just to show where everything's going. So I'm really enjoying this at the moment. Even if it's not, they are quite long rows, because I've got all this stretch of back to do. They actually are longer rows than they feel like they ought to be for this stage in the jumper, if that makes sense. It feels like maybe I should be whizzing along, but it's still a 4-ply jumper. They take time, particularly when it's hot and you don't want to have to concentrate on what you're doing. So we are working along on this one. Just in terms of, oh, I've got fluff on the ball of yarn. So at the moment I'm knitting off one cake of yarn. Because it's obviously hand-dyed and a degree of variation, that was good words, wasn't it? It's hand-dyed, it's variegated. See, we can enunciate when we try. It's very variegated yarn. So when we get to the stage where I am just going round and round on the same number of stitches, I don't want to risk it pooling or doing weird swirly stripes that look like this. These in socks are cool. I love it when socks do this. I think that's fabulous. I don't want my jumper to look like that, because that's not the effect that we need across my tummy. So at that point I will probably start to do 2 balls and alternate every row, every 2 rows. Probably not more than that. unless it gets to a point where it's really irritating me, in which case I will just keep going with one ball and hope for the best and mix in an extra odd row if it starts to look a bit funny and needs breaking up a bit. But for the moment I think we're okay, and because I am always, at the moment I'm just always increasing. So every other row at the moment has increases on it. Or is it every fourth row? I think it's every fourth row has 6 increases and every other row has 4 increases. That's not going to make any sense, is it? Okay, the pearl rows are plain, and then on right side row number 1 it's 4 increases, and on right side row number 2 it's 6 increases, and we alternate 4, 6, 4, 6, 4, 6 on right side. Clear as mud. Clear as mud, isn't it? So yeah, because I'm constantly changing stitch count, it's not going to pull at the moment. So just one ball of yarn, and it would just be such a faff to be doing 2 balls of yarn at this stage. So now that I've finished the sock, at the very least for when I'm at home knitting, this might come back into it. It's probably small enough at the moment that I could take it travelling, but I have plans for travelling knitting at the moment. I think I mentioned last podcast, that I want to try and finish the blanket that I started making after Yarndale last year. I want to finish that in time for my little boy's birthday at the end of August, and I have actually brought it up, so bear with me. Oh, right, now this is a loose one, so we've got a loose one, and then this is what I've got so far. So I've got a decent size of blanket here. You can't get it all in on the screen. Maybe if I hold it back here. It's supposed to be a mood blanket, and I'm quite a cheerful person, so there's not very much the dark colours. So it might stop being a mood blanket and just become a stripy blanket that I like. Because I do like the effect of the dark colours. I have lots of good days. And also not that much yellow yarn left. We'll get to the last bit and I'll be like, it's all doom and gloom for the final square, because that's all the colours we've got left. I've got a decent amount of yarn left, so I'm not sure exactly how many it's going to end up. It's certainly, it's, I suppose, lap blanket size at the moment. There's one more square here. There's at least one more in the box. It's 4x4 at the moment. So 6x4, 5x6. 6x4 is another 6 blocks. Definitely got yarn for that. 6x5, I'd have to do another, I'd have to do another 6 on top of that, so that's another 12 blocks. Don't know quite so much about that. But it's certainly, he's only going to be 4. I know he's a giant 4, but he is only going to be 4. So hopefully that will be big enough to wrap him up with. It's very snuggly. It's also very hot. I think he'll like having it on his bed just to be, cosy and snuggly. He keeps running off with the cottage ripple blanket, and deciding that he wants that instead of a duvet or instead of a quilt, even when it's really hot. So I think he'd like having this. It's not going to be machine washable. It's the only slight hitch in that otherwise excellent plan of giving my 4-year-old boy a knitted blanket. What was I thinking? I promise I'll let him use it. It won't be quite like the pram blankets. All of my kids, all 3 of them, have Alice Starmore patterned Fair blankets as their baby blankets, and I put hours into each of those. And when they were little and I'd push them around in the pram, they would have their actual Alice Starmore blanket on there. But when they got a bit bigger and got into the chewing stage and the drooling stage, I'm afraid the Alice Starmore blankets got packed away and put away just somewhere to be beautiful. And then we had something a little bit more machine washable, because I think blankets should be cuddled, and I don't want to be constantly going, no, don't hug it. Not to my children. That wouldn't be good, would it? So yeah, so this, it's 4 of those at the moment. So that is the plan for that, but I would also like to do this without him realising that I'm doing it. Which probably means keeping the blanket out of sight even if he sees me knitting the squares. He's probably still little enough that he wouldn't quite clock it was his birthday present. He knows vaguely that it's his, because when we came back from Yarndale last year, I had yarn for jumpers for each of his sisters, but not for him because he hadn't grown out of any of his jumpers recently. And sort of this was like, this is the you project, and then your sisters have got jumpers. So I think I could probably get away with knitting a few squares while he's around, but they also make quite good train knitting as long as I remember to take enough colours. So a couple of trips on the train and get me a square. So we shall have to, I'll have to take the wool and the pattern and the needles on the train with me. And then desperation and boredom and not wanting to not knit will mean that I crank out some squares. I do enjoy knitting them, I just fallen out of the habit of it. So I need to work on that a little bit better. So that is something that I was talking about last podcast, so I thought I'd bring it and show it to you, even though I haven't actually done anything on it in the intervening period. Right, and then, should we talk about spinning? I've been doing some spinning. I've done a little Spimbledon. I don't think that's going to catch up, is it? It's just not quite as catchy as Tour de Fleece. I haven't done Tour de Fleece. Every year I see about Tour de Fleece and I think, yes, I should do it, because I am sort of a compulsive volunteer, and anything is like, yes, I'll be in, I'll do it, and then I have to think, no, rein it back. For example, the last parents' evening I went to, I had instructions from my husband that I was not to come home as class rep because I have a full-time job and all the rest of everything else that I do. He said, don't volunteer, you mustn't volunteer for class rep. I'd love to be class rep someday, but this year, just for various entirely boring reasons, really shouldn't be the year I do it. And he still knew there was a risk. I didn't, I was very good. So yeah, Tour de Fleece. I did think about doing Tour de Fleece this year, and then I had a bit of a reality check and said, no, just don't overcommit yourself. Don't get into a position where I'm not doing something thinking, oh, but I want to be doing I have to do spinning because Tour de Fleece, or I have to do knit because of this. Crafting should never come with an I have to, unless it's Christmas. And that's an entirely different situation, and you're totally allowed to have I have to's when it comes to Christmas. But I did buy some fibre at Yarndale last year from John Arbon, who does the Knit by Numbers yarn, which I knitted a jumper for my little girl from, and it was just amazing. I want a jumper's quantity from that for me. Even when I was knitting it, it was so lovely and warm. You can tell I knit it in the winter because the warm was a plus point to this one. It was lovely and warm, even on my knees. I'd be knitting a sleeve and the rest of it sat on my knees. It's like, oh, and she's so cuddly when she's wearing it. Just like, oh, just come and give me a hug because it's all snuggly. I do love her and give her many hugs when she's not wearing jumpers I've knit, but this jumper just makes her extra cuddly. So while I was on the John Arbon stand, small piece of cattle market, delete as applicable, while I was there last year and having chosen the pink yarn to make her jumper, they had these enormous bins, like beer barrels, massive, great big things, all full of fibre, and you just told them how much you wanted, and they just sort of reeled it out and wound it up and plonked it on the scales and went, okay, yeah, that's fine. And then handed me a very rustly bag with fibre in it. Now, I can't show you what's on the spinning wheel because it's downstairs at the moment. It's usually about there and you'd be able to see it. But I took it down to watch Wimbledon and spin, which is really, really fun. Because I can just about spin and keep an eye on the telly. And when you're watching Wimbledon, the cheers will tell you what was happening anyway if you missed something important. But this is the fibre that I got, and I got 200 grams of this. And it really wasn't that expensive either. Shh, don't tell anyone. So this is, it's clearly not, it's not fibre that's been dyed. A lot of my other stuff, I don't think I've got anything easily available, so yeah. So this is, boing. This is a bit of fibre that I'm spinning up at the moment. This was a fibre braid that I've obviously bought at some point, and it's been dyed as fibre, so it's a bit sticky and you have to do a bit of pre-drafting, so a bit of drafting to get that ready. This is just bliss to work with because it's colours carded together. I can't remember what yarn is in this, but I'm going to go with merino and a bit of silk maybe, and goodness knows what else, angel's tears perhaps, cherub wing feathers. So you can, I mean it is, it just winds up like this. So it's not clumpy in the same way that sometimes dyed fibre can be. It's never a problem with the dyed fibre, But it just means that this, I just I'm breaking off sort of about that much at a time, splitting it into 2 or 3 maybe, and then it's just drafting out, and it's absolutely lovely. So I'm trying to show you all the colours in it and hoping it won't blow out the camera. Fingers crossed. So there's a dark blue, a turquoisey blue, a lovely bright green, and what it makes it for an overall impression is it's a really warm turquoise, which is good, because warm colours in me is a good thing. So at the moment, I started spinning, I think the very early bits on the bobbin are all sorts of experiments. I did think about spinning it as a singles, and even possibly like a worsted weight, Aran weight singles, but that looks a bit shiny. That sounds a really odd thing to complain about. But there's a lot of sheen in a lot of this, particularly I think because I've got silk. And I just thought it was going to look a bit too, maybe too defined as a stitch. Sort of everything would be a bit too precise. Anyway, I just wasn't quite sure about it. And I just found myself spinning thinner and thinner. So I am currently spinning probably about a sport weight. Bits of it look distinctly 4-ply, bits of it look a bit more DK weightish. I'm not really bothered about being tremendously consistent on that, as long as it's somewhere in that vicinity. And then what I think I'd like to do is, if I can find a really nice navy blue yarn, I'll have oh, excuse me, I'll have 200 grams worth, so goodness knows what yardage, but something colour workish, either a 4-ply pattern or a DK pattern, and I'll just, I'll adjust gauge and sizing to make something that matches. I've got lots of patterns saved up in Ravelry. I haven't really got anything in mind at the moment, but there are a couple of patterns that I've seen that have got almost like a honeycomb effect going on in the yoke. The fibre is flying off this. If I start sneezing, this is why. But yeah, I'm thinking navy blue with this as colour work. So something with a really chunky amount of colour work. Or even maybe a Caitlin Hunter pattern, because lots of those have got big colour work sections in there, big colour blocking going on. That's the word we want. So something maybe with a bit of colour blocking. Not sure. If you can think of any patterns that would work really well for 200 grams of contrast and then something else nice plain in the background. Maybe some more knit by numbers, that might work well together. But I am thinking of putting it with a navy blue, sort of a bit like the colour I'm wearing today. It would go quite well with that. So contrast, but I actually don't have a navy blue jumper at the moment, which is odd given the amount of navy that I wear. The colours I tend to wear seem to be navy, teal and orange. And sort of orange, orangey red in rotation. Most of my work clothes are either navy blue or orange. But I don't get to wear the orange ones. That's just for fun. We have digressed, haven't we, again? Dear, oh dear. Right, so yes, so this is what I'm spinning up at the moment. Pulling it out of the bag and seeing how tightly it's still wound around the middle reminds me that there's actually quite a way to go on this. So it might be next year's jumper or the year after. But I'm enjoying the spinning. I'm enjoying it being cool enough, just that my hands don't stick together and stick to the spinning, because that's always really annoying. But this is what we're doing on that. So, usually at this point, I'm going to put that down now, before I sneeze. Usually at this point I tell you what book I've been reading, but I am still reading the very special book, which is Susan Crawford's new vintage Shetland book. It's lovely, but I am treating myself. So I only let myself read a chapter of it a day, because I could whistle through the whole thing without coming up for breath, and I want to really, really savour it. So I am still reading 1 chapter a day. I will talk to you about that book soon, but if you get a chance to have a look at it, do, because it is just utterly beautiful. It is insanely expensive compared to a lot of other knitting books. It was my birthday present. My dad and my sister clubbed together to buy it for me, because there's no way I could have afforded it. But I think it's just got a lasting quality about it. It's not going to be a book where anything ever goes out of fashion. It's vintage patterns that have not gone out of fashion for the last 100 years. They're not going out of fashion now. So even if it takes me a good while before I get to knitting up anything in it, and there are definitely some patterns I've got my eye on, it'll still be there to make. So I'm just enjoying every moment of it. But anyway, I wasn't going to tell you about books to read. Instead, this week, we are going to have a very special guest. So without further ado, let's introduce our very special guest. And my special guest is my biggest girl. Because this week at school, you have finished some knitting.
And had an animal picnic.
And had, yeah.
With all my friends. One by one we went into, well, a little den that we have at the bottom of our school. And our handiwork teacher gave us our bags and a gingerbread biscuit. So I have today with me my rainbow hare, which is called a rainbow, and my sheep, which is called a Ronaldy.
Okay, let's just hold up your sheep. So this is your sheep, and you knitted every stitch of your sheep?
Every stitch.
And did you sew him up?
Yep.
Oh, wow. And what's he stuffed with? Because he's a 3D sheep.
Ronald's fleece.
Ronald from the Isle of Ronald's, his fleece was in your little sheep. And so is he called Ronald?
Ronaldy.
He's called Ronaldy. Ronaldy.
And this is my rainbow hare. This is its fluffy tail, which is a pom-pom.
So that's his fluffy tail.
I made it myself with no help at all from any teachers.
Wow. And this is his head?
Yeah.
Which is his head?
This is one of his ears. This is another one. That's his general face, the pink bit.
Yeah.
He is mine, and I spent quite a few days making him, like about 3 weeks or so, to make him. Aww. Possibly 8 or 9. And they have a bed together, which is what they came in, and I used it as their picnic blanket.
So your handiwork teacher made the little bag, and that's where they live. And now tell me, what are you knitting at home?
I'm knitting a snood, which is this long. I've done it for a little while. It was meant to be for last winter, but I didn't finish it in time. So it's going to be for this winter coming up.
Yeah, and how many stitches do you have at the moment?
There's meant to be 17.
Do you think you have 17?
Yeah, because I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. A bit more than 17.
I think you have an expanding snood, but that's okay. So are we going to show how it's going to look when you finish it? So it's going to go round and round, and when it fits all the way, Mummy's going to put a buttonhole in.
And I can put it around my neck and button it up.
Yeah, and it will be your very first knitted snood.
I got the idea from one of my friends at school who made one.
Oh, well that sounds very exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you know what yarn you're using? Is it Mummy's leftovers?
Yeah.
It is a bit, isn't it? Although, you once had a cardigan in that.
Yeah.
Your brother had a hat in those two. Your sister has a cardigan that involves that one. And I can't remember where that one came from. But I think we're looking at Quince & Co. Chickadee, that one and that one. Rooster Al Merino. There we are, Rooster Al Merino for these two. And Debbie Bliss Cashmerino Aran. So you have lots of nice snuggly yarn. And do you like knitting?
Yeah.
Is your favourite of all your handicrafts that you do?
Sort of.
Sort of. Are they all joint favourite? Yeah. So there we are, my very special and first ever interviewee was my big girl and her beautiful and amazingly cute knits that she made at school. So that is all from the podcast this week. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, please give us a thumbs up and say hi. And hopefully I will be back in about 2 weeks' time-ish. So we will say bye-bye for now.
Bye!